and welcome to everyone who can join in for a short reading, 10 to 15 minutes, on the book Live Well, Die Holy by the Doctor of the Church, Saint Robert Bellarmine. And this is going to be a subject matter which might seem a little bit out of the ordinary for some of you. I'd say almost all of you, really, because it talks about the sacrament of orders and the various stages in them. I ask you to be patient and please do listen, because on the one hand you'll be edified, and I'm afraid on the other hand you may be horrified. I'll just open it by saying a quote from St. Jerome, that only 1 in 100 priests lives as he ought to live. I'll leave it at that, but that was 1600 years ago. Things have not gotten better, in my opinion. Okay, so let's begin. Chapter 14, the 14th precept on the sacrament of holy orders. The two sacraments which follow, and which require a brief explanation, do not regard all Christians. One relates to clerics, and the other, matrimony, to laics, that's us. We will not enter upon all the points which might be mentioned concerning holy orders, but only speak to those matters which are necessary for a good life and a happy death. The orders are 7 in number, 4 minor orders and 3 greater, the highest of which, called the priesthood, is divided into 2. Those who are bishops are higher than others who are simple priests. Before all the orders, the tonsure is first received. The tonsure is a little cut that they make basically at the crown of your head, removing the hair at that point. It's a sign that you are a slave of Christ at that point. That used to be the symbol of slavery many, many centuries ago. Before all the orders, the tonsure is first received, which is, as it were, the gate to all the rest. This properly makes men clerics. And since what is required from clerics, in order that they may lead a good and religious life, is with greater reason required of those who have received minor orders, and especially the priesthood or episcopacy, which are not minor orders. Therefore I shall be content with considering those duties that relate to clerics. 2 points seem to require explanation. First, the ceremony by which clerics are made. Secondly, the office they have to discharge in the church, which is what they're supposed to do. The ceremony, as it is described in the Pontifical, consists in first cutting the hair of the head, by which rite is signified the laying aside of all vain and superfluous desires, such as thoughts and desires of temporal goods, riches, honors, and pleasures, and others of the same nature. And at the same time, those whose hair is being cut are required to repeat the 5th verse of the 15th Psalm, quote, "The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and my cup. It is thou that will restore my inheritance to me," end quote. Then the bishop orders a white surplice to be brought, which he puts on the cleric, saying these words of the apostle to the Ephesians, quote, "Put on the new man, who according to God is created in justice and holiness of truth," end quote. There is no particular office appointed for a cleric, but it is customary for him to serve the priest at his private mass. Let us now consider what degree of perfection is required in a cleric, and if so much is required of him, how much in an acolyte, subdeacon, deacon, priest, and bishop. I am horrified to think how many priests scarcely possess what is strictly required in a simple cleric. He is exhorted to cast away all idle thoughts and desires, which belong only to men of the world. That is, to men who are of the world, who are continually thinking of worldly things. The good cleric is exhorted to seek for no other inheritance than God, that he alone, quote, may be the portion of his inheritance, end quote, and the cleric may be truly said to be the portion and inheritance of God alone. Oh, how high is the clerical state, which renounces the whole world, that it may possess God alone, and may in return be possessed by God alone. This is the meaning of the words of the psalmist. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and of my cup. I'll repeat that. This is what they're supposed to believe. The Lord is the portion of my inheritance and of my cup. That is said to be the portion of inheritance, which, in the division of a property among relations, falls to the share of each one. Wherefore, the sense of the word is, not that the cleric wishes to take God as a portion of his inheritance and to make worldly riches another portion, but that from the bottom of his heart he desires to transfer to his good God his whole inheritance. That is, whatever may belong to him in this world. Between cup and inheritance, there seems to be this difference, that a cup relates to pleasures and delights, and inheritance to riches and honors. Because that's difficult to understand, I'll repeat that line. Between cup and inheritance, there seems to be this difference, that a cup relates to pleasures and delights, and inheritance to riches and honors. Wherefore, the general sense is this: O Lord my God, from this time, whatever riches or pleasures or other temporal goods I can hope for in this world, I desire to possess all in Thee alone. Thou alone art sufficient for me. And since he cannot have an abundance of spiritual good things here on earth, therefore the cleric continues praying, quote, It is Thou that wilt restore my inheritance to me. What I have despised and rejected for Thee, or given to the poor, or forgiven my debtors, Thou wilt faithfully preserve for me, and restore to me in due season, not in corruptible gold, but in Thyself, who art an inexhaustible fountain of all good. I have to comment on that because it's so true. God is infinite, and the goods that He can create and the pleasures that He can give to those who have pleased Him, lesser and more and even more, are inexhaustible. There is no end to it, just as eternity is without end. So are the greatness of the goods that God can give to those who love Him in heaven. But lest anyone should doubt my words, I will add two authorities much greater than mine without any exception. That is, St. Jerome, the great translator of the Bible from the original languages into the Latin Vulgate, and St. Bernard of Clairvaux, founder of a great monastery His whole family joined with him. They all became greatly holy, some saints. It's amazing. Saint Jerome, in his epistle to Nepotianus, speaking on the clerical life, thus writes, "Let a cleric who serves the Church of Christ first explain his name, and its definition being known, he must try to be what it is called, which means inheritance. Cleric means inheritance. Wherefore, they are called clerics, either because they are chosen by the Lord, or because the Lord is their inheritance. But he who has the Lord for his inheritance ought so to conduct himself that he may possess the Lord, and may be possessed by him. And he that possesses the Lord, and says with the prophet, quote, 'The Lord is my portion,' end quote, can possess nothing but God. But if he have anything beside God, the Lord will not be his portion. As, for example, if he possess gold, or silver, or land, or various goods, the Lord his inheritance will not deign to be with these other portions." Thus St. Jerome, and if we read his whole epistle, we shall find that great perfection is required in clerics. We'll just do a couple more minutes here. St. Bernard comes next. He not only approves of the language of St. Jerome, but he sometimes uses his words, although he does not mention his name. Thus he speaks in his very long sermon on the words of St. Peter, quote, "Behold, we have left all things," end quote, which occur in the Gospel of St. Matthew. A cleric, he says, who has any part with the world will have no inheritance in heaven. If he possess anything beside God, the Lord will not be his inheritance. And a little below he proceeds, declaring what a cleric can retain of ecclesiastical benefices. In other words, the payment that he gets from property or his job, as it were. Quote, "Not to give the property of the poor to the poor is the same as the crime of sacrilege. Whatever ministers and dispensers, not lords and possessors, receive out of church property beyond mere food and clothing is by a sacrilegious cruelty taken away from the patrimony of the poor," in other words, what belongs to the poor. Thus, St. Bernard perfectly agrees with St. Jerome. We'll stop here and just summarize it in simpler terms. When a person becomes a cleric, they give up everything except food and clothing. That's what they're supposed to do. They're not supposed to retain anything. Okay? They're not religious in the sense of like a Dominican or a Franciscan that takes a vow of poverty, but they're supposed to be poor, just having food and clothing and everything else perhaps being owned commonly by the church on behalf of the poor. So there's a very substantial obligation to be detached from all things. You know, St. Peter said, "We've left everything for you, Lord." And that's what the cleric is supposed to do. And the one who leaves and then returns to his plowshare is not worthy of the Lord. So it's important that a person who starts upon a clerical life lives a holy life. It's the only way to survive. You're going to have to learn to pray and pray well. And once again, if you pray too quickly, you're not going to receive consolation from the Lord. You're going to be feeling all dried up. You're going to be profoundly tempted in every single way, including to drunkenness and everything else, because that's what happens. The devil really comes after those who choose religious life because he doesn't have them yet. If you don't see the devil in your life, it's because he's got you. If you have to fight against him, then you know that things are going well because you're fighting, and you're earning merit by fighting against temptations and any other difficulties that he may bring. That's enough said. It's been over 15 minutes. I apologize for going over 15. And that will be this reading, and God willing, we'll do another one again in a day or two. Thank you, and God bless you.